Hello, I'm James, and welcome to a Jonesing for Film franchise review. This week I'll be reviewing the Lethal Weapon series. So let's start with 1987's Lethal Weapon. So the film stars Danny Glover as Roger Murtaugh, a by-the-book veteran police officer who is teamed with a crazy loose cannon named Martin Riggs, played by Mel Gibson. Now the two must work together to stop a group of drug smugglers. Now I'm going to be honest, this was the first time I have seen the movie start to finish. I had seen bits and pieces before, but I'd never actually sat and watched the movie all the way through. In fact, come to think of it, this is the only Lethal Weapon film I hadn't seen all the way through. And I gotta say, I enjoyed this film. Especially the direction this film went compared to its sequels. The sequels are more about humor with some serious undertones. This one, the humor took a backseat and the drama and seriousness pushed the film forward. Which was actually an interesting turn of events considering I've seen the other three films before seeing this one. They're more comedy, so I expected the same here. But the seriousness I found to be a whole lot more entertaining. And the seriousness is mainly involved on a character level. I mean, Riggs doesn't act nuts for comedic value. He's emotionally damaged and borderline suicidal. It's a very interesting twist on the whole buddy cop scenario. And the relationship that Riggs and Murtaugh develop feels real. It's not your typical odd couple routine. And I mean, there are some comedic moments, but it's not the focus of the film. The focus is the growing relationship between Riggs and Murtaugh, which is very deep for a buddy cop movie. Another great thing about this film is the score. It really adds to the tone in every scene. It's like a character of itself. And the action is done very well also. It's not too over the top. It's grounded in reality, which adds even more to the serious tone the movie went for. So in the end, I give Lethal Weapon a spectacular. Great tone, great focus, great characters with great development, and great action. I mean, you could argue that the villains weren't anything special, but they weren't the focus. They were just there to add conflict to characters who were already conflicting with each other. So in that sense, I have no problems with this film, thus it gets the spectacular rating. Now we move on to 1989's Lethal Weapon 2. Riggs and Murtaugh are back, this time against South American diplomats who are engaging in drug smuggling and other criminal activity, all while hiding behind their diplomatic immunity. Now, I enjoyed Lethal Weapon 2, but not as much as the first film. Where the first film was a deep, serious cop drama mixed with some buddy cop humor, this film is more buddy cop humor with some seriousness, just not the same level as the first. So what did I like? Well, the acting from Gibson and Glover is great. The two work off each other nicely, and you can tell the relationship between their characters has grown stronger since the first film. Also good is the action. The opening scenes of this movie reminded me why I enjoy action movies from the 80s and 90s. Practical effects. In this, when you see a car crash, it's actually a car crashing. If there's an explosion, it's an actual explosion. Movies these days lack that. And some of the humor is also very entertaining. However, this film has a few flaws. For starters, while some of the humor is entertaining, some of it's very cheesy. Normally that wouldn't be too big a deal, but after seeing how serious the first film was, why all of a sudden did they switch to cheesy humor? Another flaw is the addition of Joe Pesci. And I don't mean that he's a terrible actor. Give him the right role, he's good. It's just that in this, he's so annoying. I mean, I know that's how the character was written, but come on, tone it down just a little bit. And speaking of annoying, the villains in this are probably the most annoying villains I've ever seen put on film. The whole diplomatic immunity thing just bugs me. I mean, they catch him red-handed and can't do anything because he's a foreign diplomat. I'm sorry, but if you're not in your own country and you're doing something that is considered illegal in the country you're visiting, you shouldn't get away with it. Last gripe I have isn't too big, but something that kind of irks me. Towards the end of the film, Mel Gibson's character learns something and it drives him over the edge and leads to the thrilling climax. And it leading to the climax doesn't bother me, but what he learns kind of seemed forced. It felt like the writers were like, okay, we need something that'll push Riggs over the edge so we can have this big climax. I got it, how about this? It's just a personal nitpick. So overall, I give Lethal Weapon 2 a great. It isn't the best way to follow up on the first film, but it could have been a lot worse. Now let's talk about 1992's Lethal Weapon 3. This time the guys are after arms dealers who not only have armor-piercing bullets, but are also led by an ex-cop. Now whereas film 1 had a more serious tone and film 2 went the opposite way and became cheesy, this film strikes a happy medium. The seriousness isn't up front like the first film was, but there are more dramatic moments here than film 2. I mean, something happens to Murtaugh mentally about 40 minutes in, and it sticks with him throughout the entire film. They don't brush it aside and act like it never happened. It is a forefront to the film. The humor here at times is cheesy, but for the most part, it is pretty funny. But there was one character that they bring in near the beginning of the film, and then they bring her back an hour later with no mention of her between scenes, and she's never mentioned again. It's like they had this whole comedic subplot that never really took off, but left her scenes in so they didn't hurt the actress's feelings. That's how it felt to me anyways. And speaking of new characters, I really like the addition of Rene Russo's character Lorna Cole. She was this female counterpart to Gibson's character, and the two develop a romantic relationship. Now, a kind of problem I had with the start of their relationship was it was spontaneous. Like, really spontaneous. But thinking about it, that's how Gibson's character is. So I was able to overlook that fact. And Russo was a much better addition than Pesci was in 2, who returns in this film but with a smaller part, thankfully. Last thing I'm going to touch on is the action. The action is leveled up from the previous installments. Where the best action last time was the climax, here we get some more action sprinkled throughout. And it's really fun. Lots of shootouts, lots of car chases, typical 90s action, and I loved it. So I give Lethal Weapon 3 an excellent. Much better than the second film, but doesn't really quite reach the greatness of the first film. It kind of hit that nice midpoint. Finally, we reach 1998's Lethal Weapon 4. This time, Riggs, Murtaugh, and Lorna go up against Chinese slave owners, uncover a plot involving the Triad, and deal with getting older. Now, growing up, Film 4 was my favorite, and now it's my favorite of the sequels. So what did they do to make this the best sequel, in my opinion? Well, for starters, they finally found the right sense of humor. It's not that cheesy, and at times it's hysterical. Another good thing is the new cast member they brought on board. First sequel, we got Pesci. Then we got Russo, who I think is the best of the new additions. And this time we get Chris Rock, one of my favorite stand-up comedians. Most of the time his scenes play out like he was on stage doing his stand-up. And the banter that he has between Pesci makes Pesci not seem annoying. Another good thing about the film is the action. Once again, we get car chases, gunfights, and by adding Jet Li as the villain, we get some awesome fight scenes. Speaking of awesome scenes, the opening scene for this film is by far my favorite scene in the whole series. But the movie isn't just action and humor. They do add some drama to the mix. Both leads start to realize that maybe they both are getting too old for this crap. And I felt the way that they acknowledged it felt very real. If I had to give a complaint about the film, I would have to say that around the time the Triad's plan is revealed, the whole movie kind of seems a little rushed. Not a huge complaint, just something that I noticed. So I give Lethal Weapon 4 a superb. It's a lot of fun, best of the sequels, just not better than the first film. So that is my take on the Lethal Weapon franchise. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to visit me on Facebook and check out my blog. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next review.